Well, good morning. Today we are in the middle of chapter 4. Before we continue, and just to remind ourselves what the topic is about, we're discussing that in order to appreciate what is something which is a sin going against the word of Hashem, that how significant or how hurtful or harmful or significant it is, we want to first explain what is a soul, because a soul is damaged, affected by sin. We want to explain different levels of godliness that are affected by the sin. So therefore, we're going now taking a moment to explain what is a neshama, what is a Jew, and then we're going to explain the effect of sin on the soul, and then we can say, now you know what you did. Now you realize you didn't just spill, soda or ketchup on a $20 pair of whatever. It was a $10,000. Suddenly you realize, oops, a little more than I thought. My little damage there. So. But before we go further, I just want to take a moment to explain something that we didn't have time to finish last week. And that is, this is the second time in Tanya that we're discussing the soul. The first time was chapter 2. If you remember, we began Tanya after we asked all the questions. Tanya begins with like 4 or 5 questions. Then we start introducing the neshama, first the animal soul, and the godly soul, and we go and explain everything, that's how we get into Tanya. So, in the very beginning, after we explained the animal soul first, the reason why I explained it first, because the person gets the animal soul first and the godly soul. That's how our body works. And that's not what was created first. The godly soul always existed. So what comes into the body first? Is the animal soul first comes into the body, then the godly soul sort of starts coming in. We explained there what is a godly soul, and we said it's chelek elika mimal mamish. It's an actual part of God. That's what we said there. In this place, in the bottom of this chapter, chapter 4 here, that was chapter 2 of the beginning of Tanya. This is chapter 4 of Iggeres Hateshvah. When he introduces the soul, he doesn't say it's a chelek elika mimal mamish. He says it is the essence of. He says it's a shem havaya. So the name havaya, which is, as we were discussing here, the higher level of God's names. Hashem has 2 general names that are used to talk about Hashem's giving light into the world. Shem Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, or Shem Elikim. And Havaya is a much higher name. So we said the soul comes, unlike the rest of creation, as we spoke last week, all the rest of creation comes from Elikim. Everything was created by Bereshit Bara Elikim. So the soul is created from Havaya. So our question is, why in the first part of Tanya, when we spoke about the neshama, seemingly our point is to talk about the neshama, why do we mention the mamish, and we don't mention mamish here? And here we mentioned the Havaya, we don't mention Havaya there. So this seems to be like a small variance and a change, which wouldn't matter so much if there wasn't some reason for it. Good morning. So what's the reason for it? It's to understand like this. In the beginning of Tanya, we want to explain what the soul is at its highest level. On its highest level, it's an actual part of God, and that's all you got to say. Chelek elika mimal mamish. Here, we're trying to explain a point, and we want to do a sort of very fine point. On one hand, you want to explain how it's a part of godliness, it's part of God that is higher than angels, higher than all the levels. That's why Shem Havaya, not like all the other creations. This is from Shem Havaya, not Shem Elikim, how they were created. At the same time, we want to say, but it is something which is damageable. You see, our soul has deep parts to it, but there's deeper and deeper parts. The very deep part of our soul can be affected by sin. That is what's called the name of God. That part of our soul, Shem Havaya, that could be affected by sin. If someone does a sin and goes and steals or goes and eats pork, whatever they do intentionally, knowingly, they can actually hurt and damage the soul. But the chelek elika mimal mamish, God itself, that part of the soul, no sin can touch it. You see, there's a part of our soul that nothing you can do, the worst possible sin, on Yom Kippur, eating pork, hurting, stealing, God forbid, it doesn't matter. You cannot touch that part of your soul. Therefore, he calls it here Shem Havaya. What's name? The name of Havaya means, we know we have a little issue here. A name means it's not the actual thing. We always talk about a person. On one hand, the name of a person reflects your essence and is a conduit for blessings and energy to your essence. And that's why when someone gives a name, it's a big deal. The name of the person affects the person. God forbid someone's sick, you change the name. I remember Rabbi Steinsaltz came by the Rebbe by dollars, and he had some major stars in his life. He's a brilliant scholar. The Rebbe said, change your name from Adin Steinsaltz to Adin Even Yisrael. Steinsaltz means stone salt or salt stones. That doesn't sound so positive. It's a little salty. Even Yisrael, the stone of the Jews, that's a great thing. And change your name, and that will bring you blessings. What's the name got to do with it? A name has an effect. But at the same time, the name is not really you. I have no need for a name. No one needs a name. You, if you want to call me. What?
The Rabbi gave him the name?
Yeah, Even Yisrael, yeah.
It wasn't like he chose it and
No.
he asked him.
I'm saying no with certainty, but I could be mistaken, but I remember pretty clearly. I'm not mistaken. The Rabbi gave him the name Even Yisrael. I remember when it happened. But again, I'm not 20 anymore. I'm 25, and it could be I forgot some things, but I think the Rabbi gave the name. That's what I remember. So the bottom line is, and it's possible that at some previous occasion he had written in about this name. I don't know. The Rebbe by dollars seemed to tell him that Even Yisrael is the. So on one hand, the name has such an effect on you, but it's not really you. I don't need a name. I only need a name if you want to call me, and only if there's more than two of us. If there's only me and you in the world, you can just go, come here. Don't come here. You don't have to say a name. A name is only required if I want to say who I'm talking to. I'll say, okay, Linda, or Deb. Then I'll say, okay, who am I talking to now? Otherwise, you have no need for a name. Now, on one hand, it does have a connection to you, but therefore the question is, why are we talking about? If we want to talk about the soul, how special it is, why are we calling it the name of Havaya? Called Havaya. It's God. It's God's essence, because God's essence of the soul can't be tampered by sin. And here the whole point we want to bring out is what sin can affect a person. There's a part of us that sin can't touch. You are a Jew no matter what you do, your perfection, your purity is untampered with. On the more external levels, you could be damaged, you could be hurt, the core, beyond the core. So therefore, that's why here he doesn't mention mamish, but he mentions Shem Havaya, because we're trying to find a particular level where it's higher than angels, higher than all creation, but it's not the core itself. It's something just below that, and that's the part that can be touched and affected by sin. Just a point I wanted to bring out. Yes.
Is this also connected with when we're told to give the commandment not to take the name of the Lord? Is that same wording? So that our actions are actually, when we do sin.
No, so there, I don't know what the exact word. I don't know how the Chumash there what the exact wordings are, but I don't know offhand what the exact wording is. If it's name, we say the name of the Lord. When we say it in English, I'm trying shame. I can't remember the exact wording in the passage. I have to look it up soon. But I don't. If it is really, I don't know. I don't know enough insight into it. But there, it's interesting. Here's one thing. Assuming consistency in Torah, whenever it uses a certain expression, it has a common meaning, which means if there's a reason it says shame there, it's because we're talking about that level. And again, I don't know how to apply it. A possibility is if it is about the name of Hashem, it could be because when it says lashav, to use it for negativity, which is the whole point, using it for vanity, for vain, can't affect the essence of God. So it could be, again, it's a similar idea, but that's
then the avera that we do isn't just affecting us; it's affecting the.
Yes, and that is the point of this chapter. That is exactly what you just said now is the point of this chapter. The point of this chapter is to explain that not only does a sin affect you, and not only does it affect the very lofty levels of your soul, it affects godliness. In the lofty levels of heaven and the way which is godliness expressed, it actually tempers and damages. The expression we use makes a pagam. It makes a stain. It makes a fleck. A pagam is usually when you have something perfect and you make a hole or a dent in it, the imperfection. We actually can damage godliness. And that is the thought that's supposed to bring us to true remorse. Like, whoa, I did more damage than I thought. Oh, very good. So it does say shame there. And therefore, it's very possible that's exactly the same idea there. That it's referring to, and I don't know this, but it could be that it's the name of Hashem. You could be Lashav. There you could touch, but the highest level, the essence of God, you can't touch. Meaning Hashem allowed us and empowered us to be not just as partners in creation, good morning, but to be able to draw down godliness, to conceal godliness. We could do things that makes God present and makes God concealed, meaning God makes God revealed and concealed. So, yeah. Okay, now we're going to go where we're up to today. That was just the sort of insight that was important to get a picture of what we're trying to talk about here, this particular level of godliness. Okay, So we started saying, and this is where we left off last week, that the neshama of a Jew is from a much, much higher level than any other creation, any other celestial being, any other thing in the sky, the sun, the moon, the stars. And we explained those are all very lofty creations, the sun and the moon. And by the way, it's interesting that today is the 15th of Av, and we're talking about the sun today. The whole idea of the sun is the negative energies that the nations of the world try and sustain themselves from. The sun, that is weakened. It says from the 15th of Av, the sun's impact, it doesn't mean the sun itself is weaker, because the sun doesn't really change in its process of circling the earth, or how you want to understand the process. But the bottom line is talking about the effect on us. The effect of the sun is diminished. It starts getting a little cooler from today on the technical level. But not only is the neshama of a Jew higher than all the celestial beings and all the solar and all the planets, etc., it's higher than angels, higher than the highest angels, as we'll see in a moment. The three categories of angels, as we know them, all three of them are still lower than the soul of a Jew. The soul of a Jew is something higher. And I don't want to get into a topic that I don't know enough to discuss and explain, but one of the questions I was thinking about when I was learning this is, we have a famous thing we always say: angels are higher, Jews are more precious by God. And it's a famous idea. What's more precious by God is the work of a Jew. What's higher is an angel. Here we're saying that Jews are much higher, the soul of a Jew is much higher. So it could be, and I don't know, because I didn't see anywhere this sort in the source, but it could be even that statement is talking about how they are down here in this physical world, in the I don't want to say the physical world, how it is even in the revealed spiritual worlds. But in its source, in its highest source, souls are higher. That's probably the correct answer. But it's interesting. Usually we have an expression that says higher, like we used to say, higher is when someone takes you by your hand and leads you. More precious is when you do it yourself. Angels are taken by the hand. What does that mean? Angels are pre-programmed robots. They don't have a choice to say, I'm going to do this. They are programmed to do only good, and they can't sin if they want to. Jews, neshamas, could sin, could make mistakes, could choose to go against Hashem's will, as we discussed last week. Okay, so we're going here to explain this idea. That's what we're up to here. We're up to, it's just past halfway. This first word of the line is hatachten, and then adapt. And this is page Sadik Daled, which would be 187. If you have it, yeah. So it's the word v'lachin. That's why we find the angels are called elikim, and really at the same time we're doing two things. We're saying on one hand they're only called elikim, they're not called more than that, because they're not called havaya yud kei vav kei, only called elikim. At the same time we're saying a praise to them. They are called elikim. They are called by God's name constantly. We're not. We're called regular people. We're just, our names aren't God. I mean, even though we know that the Jewish people have also in their names, Yisrael can have Kel and Yishmuel, but in general, angels have God in their name properly. And we're going to bring here three verses to prove or to show that angels are called by God's name. 3 times it refers to angels and it calls them Elikim. And the reason why it's brought down, why it says 3, is because we're talking about the Srafim, Beifanim, and Chayes HaKodesh. When we say the Shema before davening, and we say the blessing of the Shema before the Shema, there's a whole beautiful description to get into the mood of saying the Shema properly, to get ourselves, after we already read through all the Psukkah de Zimra, describing creation of the world, and describing the plants and the trees and the going out of Mitzrayim, and all the beautiful things that Hashem does for us in general. We go into discussing the angels. We go into discuss the angels praising Hashem and their whole journey and their whole service, all to bring us to say the Shema with the right feeling. So we want to describe it. We talk about the 3 high levels of angels: Srafim, Chayes, Nafani, HaKadosh. These are 3 different levels of souls, of angels. And we're saying this level of the neshama is higher. And they're not talking about the highest level of neshama. We're talking about the Shem Havaya, the level that you can tamper with, the level that you can affect, is higher even than these 3 types of angels. He says, like it says, God, your God, is the God of the gods. It means the God of the angels. Or like it says, praise to Elikim, God of the angels. And also, like it says, the children of God, meaning the gods, the Elikims, came to sit, to stand. So you see different verses where we talk about the angels and calling them Elikim. Now, Lafi, why is that? Lafi Shianikas Chayasam, Hibchinas Chetzonios, Shibichinis Aisis Levad. Why are they called Elikim and they're not called Havaya? I mean, everything comes from the same place. Remember, everything starts in the same place, only one beginning. So why are the angels called Elikim and why are we called that we come from Havaya? Because we said that there's a process of Hashem creating things through spheres, through kalim, through vessels. The process was much more concealment. That means to get to the creation of an angel was a step down, so to speak, a step more of a disconnect. Not God forbid a real disconnect, but a step more further from the essence of God. Where, as we said, the angels are created, like all creations, from speech. Speech is a sort of a disconnect for me. It is something, as we'll talk about it more later, speech is something which is very, on one hand, it comes from deep within. As we know, when it comes to emotion and intellect and feelings and thoughts and expression, speech is very, very close to your soul. At the same time, you can't compare it to blowing. Blowing actually comes from a deeper part of your soul. And that's why blowing with strength is much more exhausting and much more hard to continue with than speaking. Because speaking gives off a little of self. I mean, in a deep way, but a little. Blowing, especially with force, gives off much more of self. And therefore, angels come from Elikim. V'shem Elikim, hu bechinas chetzenis gav Hashem Havaya Baruch Hu. And the other, the name Elikim, which creates all of angels, all of creation, including angels, that's from a more external part of God's expression. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
could be possibly that Elohim is connected to Gvura restraint and angels are restrained to one mission.
That's interesting. It could be. That's actually a very good point. I never heard that, but it's a very logical, good point. Angels that come from Elikim, which Elikim does mean restricted. That's more concealment in their creation. But the fact that they each have a particular one mission, that's interesting. Good point. It's an interesting observation or point, yeah. Avon nishamas ha'adam shehi mebchinas pnimis hachayis shem havaya baruch hu. But the souls of man, they come from Shem Havaya, the name Havaya. This is now going to be the stepping stone to go into what this chapter is all about, even though we went through 2 full pages and the chapter only has left about a page and a half, 2 pages. Now we're going to go into an explaining to understand what exactly is a soul. We have to first go and explain what is Havaya. If I say, you are just like Chaim, who's Chaim? What do you mean? So I got to tell you what Chaim is to say why you're just like Chaim. If you want to call somebody a soul, you're Shem Havaya, the name of God. Not just the name of God. God in his higher name, the true general is the 7 names and more, but the highest of the 2 names are Havaya and Elikim. If we want to say the soul is Shem Havaya, we had a question. So what's Havaya? I mean, I know it's a very hard name. It's a very spiritual name. We're not allowed to pronounce it. I mean, people today sometimes don't realize when you daven in the siddur, and we know it because we're davening here, but that you don't read Hashem's name to be the sound of we say Hashem, Adai, even though it spells out the name, with the vowels, because that's such a powerful name, we don't ever say it. The Beis HaMikdash, the Kohen Gadol would say it. That's why there's that organization, not to compare it at all, that we can't say that we call them Jay's Witnesses, because they say in English to try and say the word spelled out. So, but the bottom line is, we're going to explain now and it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the chapter here, explaining what is the name of God. Here goes. Hishem Havaya, Meir al Pnimiyis HaChayis. The name Havaya reflects and denotes the essence, the Pnimiyis. Everything in life, just to explain, we want to talk about Pnimiyis and Chatzonius. When it comes, let's say, just to give an example. My Pnimiyis and my Chatzonius in my rutzen, my desire, my mission, my life. I have my Chatzonius in my life. What's that? And this is, in America, this is backwards, but I don't think about America's perspective. Think about the truth. The Chatzonius in my life is my job. What does that mean? I go to work and I manufacture widgets. I manufacture whatever, toothpaste, whatever I make. And that is not who I am. That is the thing I do for who I really am as a family person or my family life, and I provide for my family or self. In other words, the Chatzonius haratzon is I'm doing things to get to my main self. So the difference between Pnimiyus and Chatzonius is it really me or is it really something disconnected a step further away from me? My real self is when I go to the work and I earn some money to go and bring money for the family. Then you can have a much further Chatzonius of Chatzonius is when I go to work and I have to go to a meeting and have a lunch with somebody, I'm not interested in lunch with him, really. I'm interested in getting his account. So now I'm having lunch with a guy to get an account from him so I can earn money so I can go to my purpose. And then we do things that really we despise to do. Someone's having to do business or pay, penalties or fees we don't want to do. That's called it's what I don't want to do. I don't even want to look at the person I give them money because I think it's wrong and I think it's unethical or immoral, but I'm forced to do it. There's different levels, but panemius means this is who I am. Chetzenius is a level something I do because it feeds and serves my primary identity. And this is a concept we find a lot in Chassidus, a lot in ourselves. And a lot of times it's good to ask ourselves in life, what's my panemius, what's my chetzenius? Who am I really? Am I a business person? Am I a husband? Am I a wife or a father or mother? Who am I? A lot of times you say, no, I spent all my time doing X, but they say, you work so hard to make a living, when are you going to live? The reason you go to work should be because you want to serve a greater purpose. So we're going to talk about the difference between the Elikim and Avaya. We're going to see is a Pnimius and Chetzenius. Avaya is Pnimius Achayis, the essence, the true self of the true inside, meaning what it really is. Shila Maila B'chinas Eisias. As we'll see, it is much, much higher than the level of letters. Letters are a much lower level, which was created all of creation. All of creation was created with words, letters. That's how he made the world. Hashem said, let there be light, let there be this, and the letters formed certain shapes and letters orders, and that's how things became who they are. That's what everything is. A lot of Kabbalistic or mystical teachings talk and explain what's the word sus mean, what's a samach, the vav and the samach, what is this, change a letter, change this, and it's all symbolic and meaning, etc., because the letters have a lot of meaning to them. But now let's go and explain it. To explain this concept, let's go back and teach one of the very famous teachings, and it's quoted so often in Chassidus, and we say it every Friday afternoon. One of the famous teachings of Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet is one of the authors that are quoted in the Zohar. So he says in the Kunei Zohar, and who turns to God, and he says, God, you are one, the apikas that revealed, Eser Tikunin, the 10 ornaments. Or the translation means tachshitim. Tachshitim means ornaments or like jewelry. And there he goes into it in some mamarim. The Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe explains the difference between jewelry and clothes. Clothes are much more essential. Jewelry is much less essential. But also jewelry also can tell you much more about the person. Sheer is much deeper than clothes sometimes. Clothes are a necessity and a need. Tachshitim, jewelry, could really bring out sometimes a lot more of the person. And it's there in Kabbalah. So you created these 10 tachshitim, these 10 ornaments, and you call them the 10 sephiros. So Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi, describes the 10 sephiros being God's ornaments and the venue, the medium, the vehicle that he used to create. To create concealed worlds. And we spoke many times, just to refresh it, that whenever we say dark or revealed, it could be dark or hidden. It could be seen as a negative or a positive. A lot of times people say if it's dark or it's hidden, it's like maybe less dark or hidden. But the truth is, when you come to the source, the more hidden it is, the more dark it is, meaning the more it lacks the ability to be seen, it's a much greater level. It can't even be expressed. It's like, I don't know if it's like, I think it's like, could be not. I think it's like certain decibels that are higher than our ability to hear it. It's so loud, our ears can't hear it. What do you mean? If it's louder, you should pick it up. No, it's too high for us. We hear silence. Maybe actually certain animals can hear it, certain creatures can hear it, but we can't hear that sound because it's too high. There are things that are above our window of absorbing and receiving it. And then he says another thing. He continues, and chakim, you are wise, but v'loy b'chachmei yadiyah. Not with the knowledge, not with the wisdom that we know. You're wise, but not with the wisdom. When we say wisdom, I was just watching a video yesterday, beautiful little piece. It's a 2-minute clip where this guy says he went by the Rebbe in the 70s sometimes. He came to the Rebbe for a Yechidus. And he asked the Rebbe, he goes, I don't understand how it's going to be. It says when Mashiach comes, very intelligent guy. You can tell the way he's speaking, it comes across very intelligent. He said, how is it going to be when Mashiach comes that we're going to go back to the Beis HaMikdash and start offering sacrifices, the animals? The world won't accept it. It's not something which is, it doesn't mean that they'll stop us. It's just so our mentality, our lifestyle, our structure, the way we look at things, our mentality, it's not gonna be an accepted thing in the world. People are gonna look at it as strange. How is that gonna be an accepted concept to go back and slaughtering animals and sprinkling their blood, something which is so archaic, So Rebbe said, when Mashiach comes, everyone's going to come and move to all the exiles will be gathered. All the Jews will come to Israel to rebuild the base of Mikdash. There will be many, many physical and literally geographic changes in the world. A lot of physical changes are going to happen. And the same thing, there's going to be a tremendous change in the mentality of a person, how he thinks, how he perceives things, how he understands stuff. The Rebbe says, I can't tell you what it is exactly to be because no one knows now. But I could tell you with certainty, our mentality will change drastically, obviously for the better. And the things that you think today are a challenge to understand or agree with, it's not that there'll be an answer. It won't be a question anymore. You will see that our mentality will change. Meaning, there's a whole different way of perceiving how you see things. It's a fascinating little video. I'm not doing it justice to repeating it. I watched it this morning. But it's a beautiful, sometimes there's a wisdom, but not the wisdom we're talking about. A kid's wisdom, for an example, is figuring out, how to get the round the peg into the round hole instead of the square hole. That's a guy who's a professor in college of physics, or especially if he's doing, these complicated drawings on the board, whatever they are. It's a whole different world of thinking. It's not even thinking of numbers anymore. It's beyond numbers. It's a whole different picture. So he says, God's wisdom is not the wisdom we know about. We think wisdom, so why is it called wisdom? It wants to give us a way to understand it. We want to have a way to understand the concept. So it gives us the word wisdom, like we explained a number of times about our map. You'll have sometimes a map, a blue mark for this and a red mark for this. It doesn't mean when you go there, it's actually blue or red. So why do you mark it blue or red? This is how we understand the structure of the map. So I made the rivers all little blue squiggly lines. It doesn't mean it's a squiggly river. It doesn't mean it's a train tracks or this. It doesn't mean the town has, the things that we use as metaphors is to understand godliness. It doesn't mean that's how exactly it is. Hashem puts it within us. As he says, Hashem created us b'tselem elikim, in his image. So we should look into ourselves. Doesn't mean Hashem has arms and legs, but Hashem has ideas, just like an arm is meant to, let's say, bring or take or push. Hashem has aspects of himself that brings in or pushes away. So when it says Hashem has chachma, it doesn't mean chachma like we think about it. Chachma means he's genius. That's not what chachma means here. It's not genius. It's not brilliance. It's a level of, as we'll see what chachma is in a minute, and bina. So Eliyahu Nabi says, Hashem, you have chachma, ve'antu mevin, you have bina, the kol hayut tzfiris nechlolos v'mez b'shem havaya baruch. And the truth is, if somebody wants to analyze and learn about God, you could find the 10 spheres all in the name Yud, K, Vav, K, and that's what we're going to start with today. We're going to start today now explaining the letters of Hashem's name, Yud, and a Hey, and a Vav, and a Hey. This is very common to find in the Maimer, very common to find in Chassidus discussed, and here we're going to go through it in a little bit of detail. So, as we know, the order of the letters in Hashem's name is a Yud, and then a Hey. It's called the first Hey, and then Vav, and the second Hey, or the last Hey. And that's when we talk about Tshuva, by the way, we talk about the first Hey of Hashem's name, the second Hey of Hashem's name, Tshuva Ilah, Tshuva Data, because we say Tshuva means Tashuv Hey, return the Hey. So we're talking about the first Hey of Hashem's name, the second Hey of Hashem's name. That will come to as we go further in Tanya. But the bottom line is that to understand all this, you have to understand the letters are Yud, K, Vav, K. And always, or I shouldn't say always, usually we divide, there's a Yud, K, the first, that's how we say Hey, K. Yud, K, the first Yud, and then the Hey is one level. The second Vav, and the second Hey is a whole nother level. We spoke about this, if you remember, in chapters 26 and 27 of Tanya originally, when we came to Hashem's revealed good and concealed good, we said there's a revealed good and there's concealed good. Revealed good comes from Yud K, and then concealed comes from Vav K, and different types of good. Like one good for a kid, let's say, revealed good is you go give a kid a big box of chocolate. Hidden good is you take the chocolate away and give him $1 million check. He's not a happy kid. I want my chocolate back. You got $1 million. It means nothing to him. So there are times in life that it's good, but you don't even appreciate it because you can't relate at that level that you are, that this piece of paper has more value than all the chocolate you can ever buy. But that's, again, we are all living in that world. Hashem takes one thing, and I don't understand. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. But that's different levels of good. We always, interesting, ask for the revealed good. And you might say, 1 second, revealed good is not so good. Revealed good, the chocolate, over $1 million. Hashem, we just ask for simple good. Give us potato chips, not sushi. Don't give me a food I got to figure out how to enjoy it. Just give me something I know how to enjoy it. But sushi is so much better. But it's raw fish and it's like seaweed. Trust me, if you get used to it, you'll see it's much better. Okay, that's revealed good as potato chips. See, he says like this: "Kol ki hayud." Okay, now you're talking. Ki hayud shehi bechines nekuda levad. Let's take the letters now. The letter Yud represents, and the Yud here we're talking about, ideally, the smallest possible dot, a pintle, just a dot. That's the letter Yud. Today we'll make a Yud in the Sefer Torah, which we'll talk about soon, is of course a much more beautiful Yud, the structure to it. But ideally, the idea of a Yud is just a dot. A dot is the difference or the intermediate between something that is not expressed or could be expressed and expressing it. Because I have a thought that I can't express. It's blank, the sheet. I have a thought that I expressed. It's a whole paragraph written up. What's between that? The first dot. The first dot, that's where I am now. It's the seed, like you're planting a tree. That little seed has already in it the shape of, if it's going to be, Macintosh apples or the Red Delicious or this. It's all in there. The type of leaves it's going to grow, the bark, the thickness, the branches, the style. It's all in there, but nothing's expressed. If you cut open that seed, you're not going to find tiny apples or tiny trees or little branches or different colors there. Why? Because it's not expressed. It's all there in a dot that's unexpressed expression, but it's all there. The information is all in that seed. If you change it when no one's looking at a different seed, you're not getting an apple tree. You get something else because it's all in there. That's the Yud. Yud is Chachma. Yud is that first dot in Kabbalistic terms, where it's always referred to the seed that the male gives in the creation of a child. But the idea is that if the seed doesn't have in it yet anything expressed, at the same time, it's all there. That's the Yud. So he says the Yud of God's name is Bechinas Nekuda Levad. It's just a dot. Meramezes L'chachmasei Yisbarach. That's what we mean that Hashem is wisdom, His Chachma. She Bechinas Helam VeHester Kedim Shabbat Bechinas Esbashtos. What does that mean in creation? God's initial creation doesn't mean in time. There was no time. I mean this, and not to explain in stages, but it's the first part of creation where Hashem begins to share of self. Hashem begins to express. Hashem begins to start revelation on some level. That's Yud. So creation began with a dot, a Yud, and that's the Chachma. That's the first stage of creation. She bechinas Helam VeHester. That's the level of absolute concealment. You will not find any apples inside that seed, even with a high-powered microscope, because it's all concealed. There's nothing there that can be found. So what's there? A guy says, I don't understand. I thought you gave me an apple tree. Trust me, it's all in the seed. But there's nothing. You could look at the fact that you don't see it means it's just not revealed, but it's all there concealed. Before it became unpacked, each thing seen. G-dly just like an idea from a teacher. The teacher says an idea. The idea is, I'll say a word, I don't know what it means. Theory of relativity. That's the word. That is I have no idea exactly what that means, but that is a huge field of knowledge. So if someone says it, what's in there? I just hear relative, like, is that a cousin? What's relativity? It's only in theory, it's not in practice. But bottom line is, don't look at the words. There's a concept here, and it could take me a month to explain to you how much depth is in here. So the initial thought, the lightning flash, is the Yud. So we understand it intellectually, we understand it in a seed, and we understand it in creation, and then we also, of course, understand it in the mind of a person. The first stage in us, it means the first expression of soul. Our nefesh elikis, and the same thing could be said of the animal soul. We're talking about the godly soul. The godly soul, its first expression in relationship to the body. What's its highest level of expression? It's the idea pops into your head. A thought flashes. You can capture it and develop it, or it could be lost and never remember it again until many years later. So the idea of Chachma is that initial seed. Now the parentheses is not really so applicable to here. I was looking at some of the discussions on this chapter. It really goes into chapter 8, is where the parentheses becomes important I shouldn't say important. It becomes part of the study, but I'm going to read it anyway and translate it. This letter, this kait literally means a thorn, but in letters it means that little tip, the tip that's sitting on top of a yud. And we're talking here now, whenever we describe letters with descriptions of the letters, little shapes and stuff, we're usually referring to the letters, how they're written in the Torah, because those are the original, the whole discussion we have today in different shapes of letters. What is the shape of the letters that God gave us? What's the actual shape? What's the original Ksava Shuri, it's called. So
with the crowns and everything.
Well, that's different Kabbalah. The crowns don't have crowns, not. So all that stuff is the Kabbalistic understanding. What's the true shape of the letter? And every crown represents something. Every dot represents something. So the tip of the yud is not just. I've never pictured it here, but if you ever look on I should have wrote one. It's actually, you see the yud is like a bit of a square, and the top goes to a little point on the top left, and the bottom right. I'm mirroring an image with you, and the bottom right is facing me, it goes to a little point in the bottom too. So it's like a little narrow top here, the yud, and then top, small bottom. That little piece on top is like a little arrow pointing up, saying there's something above Chachma. So he's not getting into it now, but just so you know, there's something above Chachma, and that's called, sometimes it's called Ratzain, sometimes called by its Kabbalistic name, which means Keser, because you have two levels above Chachma. You have what's called Ratzain and you have Tainug. Ratzain is desire, and it doesn't mean desire like I really want a piece of chicken now. Desire means like I really want to move to Israel. That's like a desire. It's a deep, deep desire. That's what I really want. It's part of my identity. It's part of what means a lot to me. And this is what will make me happy. This is that part of you. Even if someone explains to you 100 reasons why you're better off living in America, and I don't need your reasons. This is what I want. Doesn't matter. That's Ratzin. Tainug is even a higher level. It's pleasure. Not the pleasure of the Packers winning. We're talking about the pleasure, the deep satisfaction and joy you get from something that's meaningful to you.
You already got this.
Yeah, exactly. You got to Israel. That's the Tainug. You got to Israel and you're sitting on your porch and you're just watching the waves wash back and forth, listening to a niggun, sipping delicious coffee. Okay, I'll stop. Bottom line is that Tainug is like a deeper, deeper satisfaction of pleasure. These are two levels in Keser. It's called Pnimius Keser, Chetzonius Keser. Oftentimes referred to it as more technical, scientific, Kabbalistic name, Atik and Arich. Atik is the higher level in Keser, Arich is lower level in Keser. Atik is Tainug and Arich is Ratzin. But again, we're not going into that now in this chapter, this section here, but those are just, he's pointing out here that even the Yud itself, which is Chachma, really has a little shmuchi on top that goes a little higher. That refers to Hashem's ultimate will. That's where mitzvahs come from. Which comes from a much higher level of Chachma. This is a discussion. Torah is Hashem's Chachma. Mitzvahs is Hashem Ratzin. So mitzvahs come from a higher place. It's like a whole discussion in Chassidus to the origin of where mitzvahs come from, Hashem's will. Torah comes from Hashem's Chachma, and then how we apply and connect on that level, those levels to Hashem. But that's like a side, sort of parenthetically speaking. Back to our discussion here. So the first thing you have is a letter Yud, which is that first dot, the initial seed, initial idea, the flash of information. What's next? The Hey. Hey is already, if you look at the shape of the letter, it's expanded horizontally, left to right, and expanded also up and down. It's the idea now of Bina, it says Bini Yisera and Isha. It's given to a woman. A woman is the one who develops. In a pregnancy, the man, the husband, gives the initial seed, and the woman takes that seed and develops into a full child with flesh and bones, etc. It's the idea of the binyan, the binda, building it out. Okay, you had an idea. Tell me what you mean. Unpack it. Explain me what you meant. So bina represents the unpacking, the development, the technical terms that we use is bina. Chachma is conception, and bina is comprehension. One is the conception of an idea, and one is the comprehension of an idea. Comprehension means I could take it in 3D, I could explain it, I could unfold it, I can unpack it. There's a famous line from one of the great scholars in the last 100 years. His name was Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, known as Reb Chaim. And he said, the Brisker Rav, whatever the names he was called, he says, as a svelten Havana, a svelten Asaga. If you can't explain it, you don't understand it. Sometimes somebody can say, I understand it, but I can't explain it to you. They don't understand it. Mm-hmm. Understanding means I can explain it to somebody who's 10 years old, because you can unpack it carefully and make a drawing of it or a picture or present it. That's true understanding. Otherwise, you're repeating ideas. Bina means I can truly flesh it out completely. That's Bina. So he says the letter Hey of God's name represents Bina. So the Yud is Chachma and the Hey is Bina. In this case, we're not going to go into Das, what Das is, Chachma Bina Das. Das, oftentimes, this might be one of the reasons I'm thinking, I don't know for sure, I'm thinking why he mentions here in the parentheses, the little kites on top, the little keser, because as a general rule, there are two ways to mention the 10 spheres. Either Chachma Bina Das Chesed Gevur, the Paras, that's Malchus, or Keser Chachma Bina Chesed Gevur. We skip Das and we use Keser instead. So it's always 10. Sometimes we start from Chabad Chagas Nehim, as we say, and sometimes we start from Kachab, which is Keser Chachma Bina, and then Chagas Nehim. So it could be, and this is just the theory that I was thinking about, the reason why he puts in the parentheses, because he doesn't include Das in the discussion here. The whole discussion here is going to include just Chachma, Bina. We're going to skip Das, which really, Das we know means application, making it personal. You can have information in your head and you can be smart about it. It doesn't affect you. Like someone knows that smoking is bad for you, but they still smoke. And sometimes something can happen in life that you stop smoking because you realize, oh my goodness, I saw a picture of our lungs, or something that suddenly makes it personal. So we're not going into das here. We're going into just Chachma Bina, which are the intellectual or the cognitive or seichel, meichin. That's the first two letters, Chachma Bina. Now we're going to go into into Chesed Gevurah Tiferes. We'll stop here. We're going to start this on next week, and we'll go into the explanation of the rest of Hashem's name. We'll go through all the spheres, and we're going to apply it into a person and what's affected by person's sin.